Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Talk It Out. My name is Megs Reynolds, and I'm the Executive Director of the Doomer Agriculture Foundation. We are the national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian agriculture. And this month, the topic that we're covering is bipolar. Joining me today is Shyla Johnston, and she is a nurse practitioner. I'm going to hand it over to you, Shyla, to further introduce yourself.
Hi, Megs. Thanks for having me here today. Yeah, I'm a family nurse practitioner, and some of my main passions are reducing barriers and working with mental health. I'm located in Alberta, but I grew up in small town northern BC, so I'm all about the rural agriculture kind of community as well. I've been nursing for the last over 15 years, and a lot of the time has been in mental health. And I'm currently providing both mobile and virtual services as well in Alberta.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So I guess to kick things off, how would you describe bipolar?
Bipolar is a difficult term in some ways. There are several different varieties, kind of, or components within a bipolar disorder, or different kind of kinds. But it can include depressive components, manic or mania type components, or psychosis type components. And usually it has a combination of those and has kind of a very specific kind of criteria that needs to be met for that. But yeah, it includes those pieces.
So it sounds like, what one individual is experiencing could be very different from what someone else is experiencing, even though they have the same diagnosis.
For sure. And again, because there can be different components at different parts of the illness, different parts might show up. So it might look differently one year to the next, or one time to the next, where the illness is more or kind of gets worse. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. I don't think we had come across that yet in any of our conversations. Is there kind of like a set spectrum to it when talking about it? Like you talked about kind of how it's classified, or how, what doctors need to see in somebody to say like this is what's going on.
Yeah, I think that eventually there needs to kind of meet a very specific set of criteria. But in terms of spectrum, it's something that, every individual's experience can vary in severity or intensity, as well as in components of the episodes when that illness kind of flares up or kind of settles down. And so that can really vary from time to time, or year to year, or even individual to individual. It can mean kind of a different thing. Depressive components can look different for someone than another individual. And so there is that fluctuation. It can also at times be much worse, depending on a variety of different factors, or sometimes it can be more mild in nature.
Can it be like other things, other anxiety or depression, or even just your overall mental wellness, where if there's a lot going on in your life, even if it's not necessarily negative things, that just having so much going on or having so much kind of mental load as to what's going on can affect what is showing up, or what is flaring up within that individual?
Yeah, and I think that's similar with all of health in general, right? When we, have more challenges in our life, or in our physical health, or in other pieces of life, or less support, more support, kind of the way we cope with it, we manage it, with the way that the body manages stress, or our mind manages stress, can cause it to be, more intense, more worse, better in a variety of different ways. So.
Mhm. How is one of the questions we ask all the time is, when should someone reach out for help? But one of the things that kind of came through when we were doing interviews with someone who does have bipolar, and someone who is a sport person, it seems very much like it's not necessarily that individual who's going to be able to say, hey, I think that this is going on, and be the one that's like, okay, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened. Now I'm going to go check in, the way someone who is maybe experiencing symptoms of anxiety might. Is it more common that it's the people in that person's life who are going to get to a point where there are these different occurrences happening, and they say, okay, something's going on, we don't know what it is, we need to try to help connect you to support and to figure out what's going on?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that, throughout time, people gain insight. Sometimes people can have a sense of it themselves, or they kind of understand their illness, or kind of the trajectory, right? The way that the roller coaster kind of flows for them. But often it's the family members, the loved ones, the community that starts to notice some of these changes, right? So they might start to notice some of those depressive symptoms kind of sneaking in, or or some of the mania type stuff creeping up, or so on. And often, as if you're kind of getting unwell, right, as we catch a cold, we start to get worse, and there's days where that starts to get worse. Similarly, as we may get unwell, as we go along, there's an alteration in terms of how we see things, right? When we're depressed, we're less able to see things with kind of clear eyes, and if there's a manic episode, we're not seeing it clearly. So it's harder to recognize that we need help too. So it's often that those external people who are saying, hey, I'm kind of seeing this stuff going on, we need to get you some help if possible.
Mm. So is it often then, for those watching, that, may be worried about someone in their life, is it often that depressive state that can be that initial trigger that they should be looking for as to something going on?
It can be either or. Mm-hmm.
So it could
Yeah.
be, and you touched on manic. What could someone maybe see? I think when we think about depression,
Mm-hmm.
we are probably more on the same page of all of us thinking about not wanting to get out of bed, some of those things. But what can be on the manic side that
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think often these episodes can start to have kind of a change in behavior. There's kind of less need for sleep or less sleep. There's more talkativeness. There's more disorganization or speeded in their thought process, and even in their speech. They might be more erratic or more jumping from topic to topic, having a hard time to focus. There can be just a difference in behavior in terms of they might take on a lot of new tasks that really aren't their typical, or they might have really great plans, and doing many of those plans all at once and not being able to set those aside and kind of take on daily activities that they normally would. Also, there can be some risk-taking behavior that's really out of character for them, whether it be spending money, whether it kind of be driving too fast. And there's a significant degree of intensity that starts to accompany that, where it's kind of harder and harder to disrupt or redirect. It's not a matter of being excited about something. It's beyond that. It's a little bit more like intensity.
Okay, that's very helpful. Um, on the depression side, then would there be more like there's so many points under the manic side. Would there be more on the depression side too to watch for?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, it's like not wanting to get out of bed, that low mood, that hopelessness, that like withdrawal can kind of occur, that isolation, a sense of hopelessness, like, it doesn't even really matter. Sometimes it can be just like, doing the bare minimum, not eating, sleep can kind of, sometimes you get less sleep with depression as well as more sleep. Um, Again, just not enjoying things, not having interest in things, just not doing those kind of things, or not functioning. I think both sides of it, you start to see like those regular, that baseline where you're normally doing your day-to-day things, those things start to slip off the radar, right? Whether they're not attending work or not taking care of themselves, um, that stuff starts to change.
Okay. So is that kind of where it gets to on either side, where that, those individuals around that person, that's their flag of, okay, this is when we need to help try to get this person to some type of support, is when it's interfering with their day to day?
I mean, ideally, if we can notice things earlier, the better, but sometimes it doesn't always become clear right away, especially if it's not a known diagnosis and we're not really sure what that picture looks like. Um, so sometimes it might not be until there's a little bit more dysfunction that we actually know to reach out. But it doesn't mean that we can't have those conversations, regardless of whether we're not reaching out to help. Some of those conversations can just be like, hey, I'm noticing this stuff. Like, what do you think's going on? Do you think we need to do anything, or where we're at in this? Even if it doesn't necessarily mean saying, we're really reaching out for significant help. It's just more the curiosity. What's going on here with this? And if we have someone who we know has bipolar disorder, then it's a little bit easier to look for that and notice it a bit early and kind of get that follow-up done sooner on.
That was something that Candace talked about, how now she can tell and her husband can tell very early when something's
Mhm.
happening. They have a very, strategic and strict protocol of like, okay, this is what happens. And then we call our therapist and the different pieces and how, you know, takes time to get to that point after you have your diagnosis to learn those things and to understand those things. But I really liked your comments about, at the early stage, and I think we can apply that to anything, right? Like if
Mhm.
you're seeing changes in someone, just to start, yeah, pointing them out to them because they may not have noticed, and asking what they think, or, if there's something going on, and just starting those conversations early.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense too, right? Because I think if something has happened and we're feeling a little bit down for we have a loss or something happens, there's kind of a natural um, piece to that happens in terms of response, how we emotionally manage that. And so when we have those conversations, we can learn more. Is this something that's different? Is it persisting? Is there more going on to this? Kind of be more open to that and recognizing where we're at.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that because you're right. There's things that happen in life where we're going to be affected by that, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's something over here, but to be aware of how we're feeling or how people in our lives are feeling, and to monitor what's going on.
Mhm.
What would you recommend for being the best way to support someone? And this is a pretty generic question. I think a lot of what you're going to say can apply to like in anything, but to support someone that you know has bipolar.
Um, I think the biggest thing is ask them how you can help. I think that's like they know themselves, and maybe they don't have an answer, but it opens the conversation. Again, it's their experience and their challenges, and they have certain goals. And so, what can you do to support them? Listen to them. Obviously, direct them to resources if you do know. Encourage them to reach out. And the other thing is uh, like do normal things with them or regular
Right.
things. What did you used to do? Just be with them, like do your regular things. We can sometimes get caught up in illness and like spending a lot of time and energy on it and forget that life should go on and we can still enjoy regular stuff with people.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then also get help yourself, like learn more about it, or if you're not sure how to cope with it, reach out and ask and get that support too, because sometimes it's not, even if you don't have a chronic illness or the bipolar disorder, you still have an experience of it in your relationship, whether it be a friendship or a family relationship. So you're experiencing it in a different way and may need some support to look at how you're managing it or how you can support them as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such an important comment. And I think that, again, applies to so much. Like we have a mental health professional we work with often, and she works with families, and that's her big thing of it's not just about the person with a diagnosis, because we all have, things we can learn, things we can improve in ourselves, communication, coping mechanisms, what have you, that are going to, in the long run, not just support ourselves better, but support the individual in our life that does have the diagnosis, and especially on that communication side. And
Yeah, and I think this comes back to like the support of the whole community as well. Like, or your initial question too is that all that life stuff, does that play into it? And the better our supports are, the stronger our supports are, the better the overall health of everyone in that community is as well. So again, what can you do to strengthen yourself, increase your understanding, make sure that you're doing the things you need to do as well for yourself.
mhm. I think this really piggybacks on the last question, but what are things that kind of we, everyone in general can do to help reduce the stigma surrounding bipolar?
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, talk about it, learn more about it, ask more questions, just be curious, I think. Um, I think also um, recognizing that a bipolar diagnosis is not someone's choice, and it's not because they did something wrong or weren't trying hard enough. It's a chronic illness that unfortunately someone has to experience. And that there's lots of challenges that come with having chronic illness, whether it's a medical illness like a seizure disorder that you're managing throughout your life, or a mental health disorder like bipolar anxiety that you're managing. They come with challenges, and we all have challenges of different forms. So just recognizing that that's part of the experience. It's nothing different than any other chronic illness in many ways.
Yeah, that's a very great point. Resources, where are the best places for people to, I would say on both sides, like someone who maybe has a new diagnosis, maybe people that are on that support side, or just people that have watched this and they want to continue learning more about mental health in general, but bipolar specifically.
Yeah, Yeah, I think a lot of like local and provincial health, like in for people with mental health challenges. I mean, we all have mental wellness challenges at all periods of time, right? Or not all periods of time, at various points of time in our life. But so reaching out to those professional supports and managing, right? So local and provincial health, whether it's your family provider, whether it's therapists, using some private services and therapy that might support. There's lots of support groups as well out there in various different forms, whether they're virtual, in person, text-based, web-based. There's lots of family support services as well. There's crisis lines. I think there's also legislative support. So if somebody is kind of at having challenges, especially with risk, there are supports in that form or other. Um, yeah, and I don't have a ton of information in terms of where families can find more information about bipolar, or friends or family. I don't know if you have come across some yourself, Meg, in these conversations, but Google is everyone's best friend here.
Yeah, I feel Google can be a best friend, but then it can also be like I think you kind of got to know how to find information. So I'd say probably someone like the Mayo Clinic or something that you know is like a
Yeah,
recognizable refute or yeah, a source that you can
reputable
trust.
source.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. And
exactly.
that's often why like support groups I think are really great, or like you say, the Mayo Clinic is a good reputable source that kind of gives you that information.
Is there anything that we didn't cover in our conversation today that you feel we should touch on before we sign off?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for everything that you shared and all the work that you're doing. I think that just the information and the insight that you've added today, it goes really well with everything we've learned through the other interviews that we've done. And I think that, you know, our goal in all of this is just to help break down that stigma and normalize the conversation and bring light to some things that we're not already talking about. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks.
For anyone looking to learn more information about mental health in Canadian agriculture or to connect to resources that are out there, please visit the domore.ag. You can also connect to our free national peer-to-peer support platform that is at domore.ag/agtalk. Thank you.